there's a command. It's a very complex book. I think there's maybe 3 different sermons in it. It's called Devarim, or Deuteronomy. And it's much more important than you realize. When Moshe ben David was confronted by the devil, he quoted from this book. It is that powerful. And we are dealing with the demonic. The demonic is real. The Kabbalistic and white magic demonic blowback that we're getting is quite horrendous. And doctor visits and everything else are necessary, but especially this nightly revival Zoom meeting. And why is Deuteronomy so important? It's because everything hinges on your attention and your obedience to the words of this book. And when I say everything, I mean the lifespan, the protection. Now, really here, I'm talking about the Jewish people, but this applies to all of us in a tangential way. The lifespan, the protection from deportation and exile, the physical health, the prosperity, staying out of debt, the well-being of the children, the esteem in the eyes of the world, the good fortune in every aspect of life, even life itself. It says, it is no trifling matter for you. It is no trifling matter for you. Rather, it is your very life. Your very life depends upon it. If you were on death row and your lawyer came and visited you, and he said, well, we're going to make one final appeal. It's a legal brief, and we're going to try to get clemency, and especially, even if we can't get clemency, we're going to try to get an extension, an appeal, so that they don't kill you next Tuesday. Well, I'm sure you would read that legal brief. And Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 47, what does it say? For it is not a futile thing, a vain thing for you, because it is your life. And through this thing, ye shall prolong your days in the land, whether you go over Jordan to possess it. It's not a small matter. He said that also in chapter 4, verse 1. He said, now therefore listen, O Israel, into the statutes and the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that ye may live and go in and take possession of the land which the Lord your God, the God of your fathers, has given you. And then in verse 3 and 4 of chapter 4, your eyes have seen what the Lord did. And you gotta cleave to the Lord. You got to hang on to the Lord. And then he says, chapter 4, verse 40, he says, thou shalt keep therefore his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee this day, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee, and that thou mayest prolong thy days upon the earth. which the Lord thy God giveth thee forever. You want to live? You want to hang around for a while? Then don't get off on your own desires, what you want, what you like, what you don't like, what you are thinking about, what you want to get, but meditate on this book. Then you will have life. And so get the picture. They're poised in Moab. They haven't set foot on the promised land yet. They got to go across the Jordan. And they are in that ancient kingdom that's east of the Dead Sea in what is today the modern country of Jordan. And so look at a map, visualize their position. They're across from Jericho. They're on the opposite side of the Jordan River. And Moses is now old, and I know the feeling. He's 120 years old, chapter 34, verse 7. He is old, and he's going to preach maybe 3 sermons, and they're going to be put together and in one book called Deuteronomy. And he's going to write and teach his last hymn. He's going to deposit this book with the Kohanim and the Zikanim. This will be his last will and testament, just like Kefa has a last will and testament. Paul, Rav Shaul has a last will and testament. We're talking about 2nd Kefa and 2nd Timothy. This is Moses's, Moshe Rabbeinu. This is his final swan song. He's going to lay hands on his successor. He's going to preach his last message. He's going to expound and reinterpret and reiterate the Torah that God gave at Mount Sinai, which is called Horeb. And he's going to basically renew the covenant between Israel and God with this new generation that is going to go across the Jordan. They're going to do all kinds of things that Moses won't be able to do with them. It's a little bit sad. It's a little bit sad. My teacher, Donald McGavern, used a typewriter, actually his secretary. And he was a very old man. To my knowledge, he never really had a computer. And to my knowledge, he didn't know much about the internet and all of the great, cell phones and all the great technology that's going on now. And he had to die in the early 90s, and that was it. And it's a little sad that Moses is going to miss out on all this, but he has done what God wanted him to do. And now he's 120 years old. And he has led the people of Israel to the threshold of the promised land. And there was some opposition, and there was a battle or two. There was a king named Og. He was a giant, and there were going to be some more giants. When David faced off with a giant, he must have been thinking about old Og, the famous Amorite king, the king of Bashan, the giant Og. And Moses had to do some warfare. But the same God who fought against Pharaoh and Og and Sihon is going to fight against the heathen occupiers of the Holy Land. And this was sort of training for Yehoshua, chapter 7, verse 18 of Deuteronomy. He says, "Thou shalt not be afraid of them, but shall well remember what the Lord thy God did unto Pharaoh and unto all Egypt." And Moses is concerned about the idols that are in the Holy Land. He's afraid they won't completely destroy them. That the little foxes will mess things up. And so in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 27, he says, "For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck." He said, don't say when you go in and take the land, "Oh yeah, our righteousness got us this. I'm such a righteous guy. Such a good guy." Don't defend yourself like that, because you are a stiff-necked people. And he says, that's in chapter 9. But here he says in Deuteronomy 31:27, "For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, ye shall," it says, "ye have been rebellious against the Lord, and how much more after my death." In other words, if you were giving me all this trouble while I was with you, now that I'm going to be with the Lord, how much more trouble are you going to be with me not around to give you the what for? He's concerned. And I want to tell you something right now. I'm concerned about Art of Spiritual International, because the devil already took out one Bible society, and he would certainly like to take this one out. And, I'm thinking about who's going to be running this organization 20, 30, 40 years from now. Will they be putting out a gender inclusive liberal Bible? Will they be saying that Isaiah is talking about a young woman instead of a virgin? To whom much is given, much is required. And I'm praying the Lord will keep me strong enough mentally and physically so that when I make my exit, things will not go down the tubes. And that's what he's talking about in Deuteronomy 31, verse 27. The whole book is really a sermon. And the backdrop is that 34 years before, the previous generation had been commanded to go in and take the Holy Land, and had nevertheless rebelliously, notice that word rebellion, chapter 9, verse 23, they had said no. Who do you think you are, Moses, to tell us to do this? We're not going to do it. There was an insolence and an insubordination. And if you want to get in trouble with God, go that direction. Chapter 9, verse 23. Likewise, when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, "Go up and possess the land which I've given you," then you rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God, and ye believed him not, nor hearkened, nor listened to his voice. You have been rebellious against the Lord from the day that I knew you. And this was their own death sentence. Those 10 spies, they gave an evil report, didn't they? Their bodies were littering the wilderness. They didn't get to the point where they could hear this sermon. They didn't get to the Jordan. 38 years before they started their stuff, and now they're gone. Bye-bye. Listen, it's up to you. If you want to go on down the road, you go right ahead. You won't be the first. We've had many defections over the years. You shall not act as you are acting here today, all of us according to our own desires. For you have not yet come into the rest and the possession that the Lord your God is giving you. Deuteronomy 12, verses 8 to 9. And the preachers today, they've got to remember that the word is preeminent and that the prophet is one set apart from the people who remains before the Lord to get the word for the flock. And there will be demonic attacks, and you cannot listen to your own heart or feel sorry for yourself or get into your own emotions. You have to die to self, put on the whole armor of God, and keep your nose in the Bible. In chapter 31 through 34, we have Joshua, and he is designated as Moses' successor. And then also, there is an indication that the Moshiach will be the final successor. Chapter 18, verses 15 to 19. And he's exhorting this new generation to keep yourself in the love of God and to heed the commands and to be filled with faith and to go in and obey God and take the land. And remember, you are a divinely set apart people, and you enjoy a privileged relationship with God. And he has told you you've got to transmit this teaching to each new generation. And so he does his own transmitting right here in this book with 3 sermons that wrap it all up. Your children who do not yet know good from bad. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 39. The children. And remember, Moses was rejected at Kadesh Barnea. And what was Kadesh Barnea? That was the fateful turning point of unbelief. When the 10 spies gave the evil report, and every generation has an opportunity to obey God, and every generation has an opportunity to reject God and go their own way. And every generation has a Kadesh Barnea turning point temptation, and you must say no to it. Now, friends, listen to me. If I'm preaching the wrong thing, if I'm Jim Jones and I say, take your eyes off this black book, and I throw it, then you need to leave this ministry. But if I am preaching the scriptures and you know you're called here, then when you're put to the test and there's a trial and a temptation, and you're either going to march ahead in faith or you're going to take some ground for God, or you're going to rebel and grumble in your tents. Chapter 1, verse 27. And this turning point comes, you've got to say, no, I'm not going to grumble in my tent. Chapter 1, verse 27. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 27. And ye murmured in your tents and said, because the Lord hated us, he hath brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. And they were angry with Moses, and they wanted to rebel. And, you know, you need to really study through the Bible in a very deep way every year. And when you get just a little bit remote from the Bible and you start reading the newspaper all the time and watching the news and staying up on this political thing and that political thing and getting into this book and that book, and your Bible gets a little dusty on the bookshelf, watch out. Because when the word is not nigh thee in your mouth and in your heart, then you are not ready with your service revolver when the devil comes around. But Yeshua was armed and dangerous when the devil came around. And what was he armed and dangerous with? What was his ammunition? His ammunition was this book that I'm talking to you about right now, which you haven't read for a long, long time, which you need to read through from beginning to end. You need to study it because it gives you all kinds of life-saving warnings. Because you see, we don't know that we can get through the wilderness and across the Jordan River. Moses wasn't able to. We have to trust God. We can't say, well, you know, I'm the great this person or that person. I know I can do it. After all, I have a degree. I went here. I went to this seminary. I know this person. I know that person. I've written all these books. I know I can do it. No, you don't know it. This is part of the test. And you've got to get through the wilderness. And you've got to make your calling and election sure. And I want to talk to you just for a minute about an atheist named Anthony Flew. Now, he heard C.S. Lewis, and he debated everybody. He was around a long time, and he was the #1 atheist. Anthony Flew, a philosopher. But one of the last things he wrote before he died is a book called There Is a God. And you might ask yourself, well, what brought this man to faith who had been an atheist, a notorious atheist, who had been an atheist for generations? What brought him around? And in this book, which was published by Harper One with an appendix by N.T. Wright, who just gave us a New Testament called the Kingdom New Testament, a contemporary translation. He tells you that it was the arguments regarding design. There was a beginning. Therefore, Genesis 1:1 is true. An atheist has to believe that there was never a beginning and there won't be an end. If there was a beginning, there would have to be a creator. And he finally came to faith. And then N.T. Wright put an appendix in this book, There Is a God by Anthony Flew. And in this appendix, N.T. Wright explains that Jewish burials are not like modern burials. It's a two-step method. Now, in the case of a sister that we know, she was embalmed, put into a casket, and her casket was lowered on top of the casket of her husband. But not so in Israel 2,000 years ago. First, they wrapped up your body in the takrihim, the cloth, the shrouds, with plenty of spices, and they placed it on a ledge in a rock tomb. They didn't bury it the way we do today. And the spices were because of the smell of decomposition. And you wouldn't go to all that trouble if you were going to bury something that you couldn't smell because it was buried. Because what they were going to do is, after the body had decomposed, they were going to go back and put the bones in an ossuary, a bone box, which they could then store. And this is what happens with archaeology. Their archaeologists are always digging up these ossuaries in Jerusalem, dozens of them. Every time there's a new road or a new hotel or something is being built, they dig them up. And here's the point. If the body of Yeshua had still been in the tomb, that would have been easily found out. Then they would have said, you know, we really had some strong hallucinations, didn't we? But we've got to get counseling or something because, you know, he hasn't been raised from the dead. We've gone into the tomb and there's his body. There it is. So the first thing that we know is it was an empty tomb. The second thing that we know is that the takrihim and the mitznepet, the head covering, were found in such a neat configuration that the apostle, the Shaliach Yohanan, who wrote the gospel, the three epistles, and the book of Revelation, he came to faith even before the appearances, because there was no sign of tampering or a grave robber's handprint. As a matter of fact, there was a clear indication of a dematerialization and a materialization, that whoever was in that shroud, that mummy-like encasement, had simply dematerialized out of it, stood up, took the head wrapping, and neatly folded it up. And when Yohanan saw that, he came to faith immediately. And how do I know that? Because I've read the end of the Gospel of John, which you need to read. And this leads us to the conclusion that the tomb was empty. There really was sightings. They really did meet with someone who materialized and dematerialized, whom they recognized as Yeshua. even though he was strangely transformed, they knew it was him. And so the empty tomb and the appearances give us an explanation. He really was raised in the Tehiyas Hamasim, which means that the Tehiyas Hamasim, the resurrection of the dead, has actually already begun. You say, oh yeah, pie in the sky by and by. No, the pie has already been served. The judge is already alive. This is not something in the sweet by and by. It's already started. It's already in progress. It's like a train that's already left the station. And my friend, we better make sure we get on that train. The train is moving very slowly, so there might be time to race up there and jump on. The conductor will let you on. But the resurrection of the dead train is already leaving the station. There was an old man with a walker that I used to encounter all the time. And I always witnessed to him. And the way I would witness to him was the train is leaving the station. And he knew what I was talking about. That he was running out of time and he needed to get right with God, and he needed to receive the Messiah. I don't see that man anymore. I'm almost certain that he has passed away. But that's what we're talking about. The train is already leaving the station. The body of the Moshiach has already been renewed and transformed and ready for eternity. He's already alive. Death can never touch him again. And that's the way we understand the dimension of God that we have now. The resurrection of the Mashiach ben David. It's a sufficient explanation for the empty tomb and all the meetings that came after that are written down in this little book that's hanging from the light, which God willing will be published by the end of the summer, and which we are praying for every night, because we want to distribute it in Crown Heights and all over the Hasidic world. And Lord, right now, in the name of Yeshua, I want to pray. I want to ask you, Lord, to help us to stabilize our ministry, to not let the boat get rocked. We don't want to rock the boat. This boat is carrying cargo that's far too valuable. And woe to me and woe to you if we rock this boat. And oh God, help us not grow weary in well-doing. And oh God, we cry out to you right now, how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And we ask, Lord, that you would bring Art Marshall in and get James Washington down there on time at 11 o'clock to teach him. And get Wayne Gilbert back in the services in one piece, well and able to preach. And we also pray this for all of us. And we'll give you the praise. And everybody said,
Amen.